way. Thank you, Ms. Morrell.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson. And I want to thank Justice and Beyond and the pillars, the founders, the members, everybody joining us both on Zoom, Facebook, and by telephone. I was a founding member of Justice and Beyond more than 10 years ago, and I've been proud to stay involved and supportive of the causes that Justice and Beyond represents. But I'm so pleased tonight to be here and honored because of the august panel of wise people that have agreed to join us for a little bit. I'm going to introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to have a two-part question for each, and maybe they can answer in 3 to 5 minutes. And then we'll open it up for a round of questions. I'm hoping we'll have more of a discussion and less of a traditional forum. And we want to get engaged, and we want to share our understanding so we can be stronger together after all of this. So joining us tonight is one of my lifelong friends, Terry Baquet. He's editor-in-chief of Verite News. It's a new Black-led online news organization here in New Orleans that just launched. I'm going to post a link to Verite News in the chat box so you all can bookmark it. But Terry's a 28-year veteran of NOLA.com, but he may remember that he actually worked at the newspaper 44 years ago with me back in the late 70s. But Terry shares in a Pulitzer Prize, two Pulitzer Prizes that NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune won after Hurricane Katrina. He was managing editor and director of print. He oversaw all editorial decisions for the newspaper's print edition here in New Orleans and for the other newspapers in the Advance publications chain. Terry's a native New Orleanian. You probably know his family. They've been involved in journalism, hospitality, business, jazz, and we're just really pleased that Terry's been able to join us tonight. We also have Dr. George Amity, who's also a native of New Orleans and somebody I've been honored to know pretty much all of my life. He's the Emmett Bashful Endowed Chair of Political Science at Southern University. And Professor Amity has taught political science, but not just political science. He's taught history, life, and service to generations of public servants, political activists, community leaders. He's played an essential role in molding the culture and the unique mission of SUNO and how it serves this city. But he's also a scholar and a published author. And I want to recommend one of his recent papers that I didn't get his permission to recommend to you. The title of it is Community Attitudes Toward Policing, Implications for Social Justice. And I will post a link to that in the chat box so you all can save that and read that paper at your leisure. And then finally, we're joined by Andronika Morris, who's a native of Louisiana. She serves as Executive Director of Housing NOLA, which is an important 10-year partnership. Community leaders, stakeholders, public-private neighborhood groups working to solve this really critical affordable housing crisis we have in New Orleans. But before she took over that role, she put together a 10-year strategy and implementation plan on public housing that really highlights the need that we have for public housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, and housing policy that works for all of us. Andronika is a change agent on the cutting edge of where politics meet people, not just on affordable housing, but on utility rates, environmental protection, healthcare, and equity. So I'm glad that they're all with us tonight. I'd like to start by asking Mr. Baquet a two-part question. Terry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We've all gained an understanding over the recent years of how information has been manipulated, adulterated, created, miscreated, and targeted to intentionally mislead and manipulate the audiences. And on a local level, in this past election, we didn't see much coverage from the legacy and mainstream media on local elections, on the school board election in one district, on the very important Public Service Commission. And I think it reflected in turnout. We had the lowest midterm local turnout in 4 cycles here in New Orleans. So I'm wondering, with all of the information, the velocity of information, the speed and amount coming at people, the misinformation, disinformation that we receive every day, all day long, how did truth and the interest of truth fare in this most recent election? And how can stakeholders get the reliable information they need to act in their own best self-interest, especially at the local level where we see legacy media with little interest in the elections and the issues that actually matter to people?
Well, thanks for having me first. I think the divisiveness that's going on in this country, not as much in New Orleans, but the political divisiveness that's going on in this country has basically thwarted the ability for the truth to come out. People find news where they want to find it. And now, because of the internet, you don't have to read truth if you don't want to. You can read what interests you have. You can read news only from the perspective of your upbringing or where you're at right now. And I think, especially in New Orleans, people in certain communities are sort of in a constant struggle to get news that serves their best interests. It's word of mouth, community organizers. That's why we created Verite, honestly, because we would like to speak for folks who aren't being spoken for, to do stories in the interest of people whose issues are not being covered. And I think we can do it. I think we have to gain trust in the community. We have to talk to the right people, and we have to let people know that we're here to serve them. They're not getting coverage from, and I don't mean to be critical of the big news organizations, but they're for-profit news organizations, and they're beholden to advertisers and subscribers, and the little guy just is a second-class citizen, literally, and they're really not thought about when it comes to covering their interests. And I think that's why Verite as a nonprofit can make moves into these communities, gain trust, do reporting for people who are underserved and ignored. And I think that as long as we keep fighting and pushing, that we'll get to the point where, we'll gain that trust. And I appreciate being on the call with all of you people, because I hope you could help me get the word out about veritenews.org.
Great.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think you did. I posted the link to Verite News in the chat for everybody. Please bookmark it and follow them closely. We're going to get back to Terry in a minute, but I did have a question for Dr. Amity. Lots of people were surprised that the big red wave we heard about didn't materialize, that the Democrats didn't suffer big congressional losses in a Democratic president's first term, as history suggests. Democrats retain control of the Senate and can increase the margin by 1 with a victory by Reverend Warnock in Georgia. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And Democrats did much better in House races across the country than most expected. Dr. Amity, in your opinion, was the election more a validation of Biden's agenda and his achievements, or was it a rejection of the MAGA agenda of authoritarian white grievance? What was it more of? And more importantly, what does this mean going forward for a national progressive social justice policy agenda? And what does it mean on a local level?
Thank you, Jock. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to speaking with such an illustrious group from Justice and Beyond. It's a group that I've spoken to quite some time ago, but I have not recently. And so I'm honored that you invited me to contribute to this dialogue. Let me just say that I think it's the latter in terms of not to take away anything from Biden, but I believe it was the mega perspective that the majority, not to say that it's not still there, that the majority of Americans rejected. If we look at this election, it sort of pitted inflation, immigration, and crime, and on one hand, and against abortion, the Trump mega piece, and related to that, the overall threat to democracy. And so I do give President Biden credit for the things that he passed and that he's attempted to pass, and for articulating the threat to democracy and putting that front and center. I think he deserves credit for that. But I do believe that it was a combination of bad candidates, the potential of denying rights that we've been accustomed to, and the Biden piece as well. So, I've been analyzing what's going on in this country from what I call the fascist lens. And so when I see those pieces, in terms of irrational kind of behavior, minorities being scapegoat, in terms of stormtroopers and intimidating people at the polls, not denying the traditional institutions that we've relied on, and so I see that to me, that was the most important factor, along with abortion and others, and the potential for future rights that we, voting rights, and also even fundamentally saying that Brown is not established law. So this is, those are the things I think that, and I was as surprised as everyone else, not so much the way, but that the Democratic Party did so well, but that just let us know that the mega wing of the party is not every American. So it was kind of refreshing. It was also refreshing that we seem to have a fairly secure election. Deniers were rejected. So, I think that was a positive. Now, your question with respect to social justice, I think it kind of got hidden in this whole election under the banner of the threat to democracy. So I take, for example, if we look at some of the social justice issues, of course, inflation, is that a social justice issue? Well, really not, because when, our answer to inflation is really bordering on a recession, which kind of targets people that are already in a bad situation. If you look at, for example, education, the whole discussion around early childhood education, that has disappeared off the Richter, and that's supposed to be a kind of one of those things that bring everyone up. The debt, the Supreme Court has come in, and even Biden attempt to forgive 10,000, 20,000, that has been rejected. And of course, the most important one from my perspective, is in the area of criminal justice, we still see the continuation of murders of young Black men. So that has not retreated. So from the stand now locally, we have not had any real progress. I mean, I guess that's my thing. If you look across the country, and particularly in the area of criminal justice, where there have been some progress, you see that there's a lot of, at the city and county level, a lot of the counties and cities have elected prosecutors and DAs who are coming in with a more social justice orientation to addressing crime. That, kind of Jason Williams sort of approached that, but not to the level of being able to succeed to get the kinds of things passed that others across the country have gotten. So in terms of the, and then of course at the national level, I just think that it's going to be a hard lift to go back to get some of those issues of social justice. We can forgive the corporate loans, but we can't forgive the student loans. So I just still see that social justice still requires more in terms of organization and push.
Thank you, Professor Amity. That's a great segue, because I wanted to ask Ms. Morris, since you really work at the cutting edge where all of this comes together, politics, public policy, community organizing, and the pocketbooks of our people. Do you think that we're going to be able to continue making this incremental progress, or do you think this election is going to represent the Democrats more satisfied with the status quo and being politically expedient rather than moving this progressive agenda ahead? And connect that to us locally and the most recent elections. And I know we have a runoff election, and everybody on this call is interested in the Public Service Commission race. Can you tie all of that together for us?
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you all for having us back, having me back again. I love doing Justice and Beyond, having these conversations. This is, what we get up for every morning is we want to make sure that community has this information and is making it actionable. So this is a really great time to have this conversation because there's an opportunity here, but it's an opportunity that often eludes us, and we keep fumbling the ball. And Jacques, you hit it dead on, that even when we've seen this movie before, when we get massive amounts of federal investment. This was the movie after Hurricane Katrina. And in the last 17 years, New Orleans has had multiple infusions of capital directed towards social safety net issues. And when the money hits Louisiana, the state, and then when it gets down to the city level, it manages to go awry and it's not fully implemented. The promises are not honored. And so I do think, from looking at the board, from looking at these issues, the Democrats got sent a very strong and clear message that if you continue to deliver on the promises that you made and issues and real progressive and liberal investments, if you center the rights and the needs of women, Black women in particular, and their children in particular, we will go toe-to-toe with the QAnon crowd and the MAGA crowd. We will go toe-to-toe with them. There are slightly more of us than there are of them, and we will go toe-to-toe with them. Louisiana isn't there yet, and Louisiana isn't there yet because the disinvestment started. What the country is pushing back against, I've said this before, COVID was like 50 Katrinas across the country at the same time. And I know that that's not the most elegant and apples to apples analogy, but be with me in this, right? The people who it hurt, the people who it marginalized, like the damage done to every major system like transportation and healthcare and housing, how similar that was, not from a physical, like not a storm or flood moving through, but how those systems were compromised in COVID were the exact way they were compromised with Katrina. And we were the canary in the coal mine 17 years ago. We were the warning for the rest of the country, and the rest of the country didn't heed it. And then COVID showed up. But the rest of the country has responded, and much of the country has responded and said, yeah, we don't like this. We don't like this at all. We don't want to live like this. And unfortunately, the people of Louisiana, because we've been so battered, because we were weaker, because we had not fully recovered from Hurricane Katrina, we have not been able to get our feet up under us to stand up and to deal with this. Our communities are not resilient. We keep expecting our people to be resilient. So I do think that there is cause for cautious optimism of significant, another set of once in a generation investments coming here locally. Particularly when you talk about looking at our grid, when you talk about the electrical grid, when you talk about looking at infrastructure, there's a real chance to make our communities resilient. And it is incredibly important that those local and state politicians and policymakers be held to account. And that's why meetings like this are so important. Justice and Beyond and groups like it are so important, because we have to ask the people to do the extraordinarily hard thing right now. We have to get them to vote smart, and then hold the people we put in office accountable. And that's hard. That's gonna be, we can't be letting them, hey, honey, baby, sweetie, and lie and prevaricate and talk about how things are hard. And we just don't understand. We can't let them do that. We can't continue to let them do that, because we know what this looks like already.
Yeah. Thank you, Andronika. I want to follow up on that. And considering where the dust has settled nationally, what does next year's governor's race look like? What is at risk, Terry, in a governor's race where we have a gerrymandered legislature and likely a Republican governor? All of the constitutional officers likely Republican. What's ahead? Can we protect, basic things like Medicaid expansion, or the minor gains that we've been able to make on things like Medicaid expansion, criminal justice reform? Are those at risk in Louisiana in the coming year?
I think so. I think I think the guys who are going to be vying for the governor's job have sort of reduced themselves to something that is not worthy of the position. And I think we should be scared about everything. I think because politicians who want to not see certain communities develop and grow, and certain laws that we've lived with for a very long time, have gotten used to, who want to see them disappear, they don't, they'll fight dirty. And they've revealed themselves to be folks who really, truly will do anything to get their cause across. And, it's scary. I think this gubernatorial election is something that is not going to be particularly great for Louisiana or for, our folks.
Thank you, Terry. Dr. Amity, I know that you are a student of history, Louisiana history, and specifically the early through late 20th century, especially the mid 20th century, and the governor's races through that era, and all that was at risk. Do you see any parallels or similarities between the post-war 20th century civil rights era and what we might be facing in Louisiana in the coming year?
Absolutely. It seems as though we have the pendulum swinging. And of course, we had, when you say what we look forward to, it's basically the return to gender. And so, and even maybe the return to worse than gender. Now that's hard to even imagine that things can be worse than gender. But I remember we did put together, the election of Governor John Bell Edwards, and that was done with a coalition. I don't see any candidates as we speak on the horizon that possibly African Americans can get behind that would duplicate that feat. On the other hand, sometimes the candidates that are there. So we have had that back and forth where we look like we made progress and then it kind of swung back. But I do think that when it comes to the election, it's money, message, and movements. So, I don't think it's hopeless, but right now I'm not seeing anyone. It looks like the pendulum is swinging back, because if we look at, John Kennedy getting 65% of the vote. I mean, that's scary, and so, that's what I sort of see. Yes, it's when you make 2 steps forward, you always have the next, I mean, look, for example, even with SUNO, the attempt to dismantle SUNO under the gender administration and merge SUNO. Well, whoever's coming back in there this time around, that's going to definitely be on the chopping block. So, yes, I think there's a lot to be cautious about, but I do think that we do have the playbook on how to defeat it, but it's kind of late, we talk about next year. So we need to be able to put those things in line.
Well, yeah, it seems to me that there are echoes from the Jimmy Davis era that we hear in Louisiana right now, and not a lot of people old enough to remember that, and because of where it occurred in history and all of the other things that happened in Louisiana. A lot of people aren't aware of the effectiveness of coded messaging and misinformation, disinformation in that era. But Andronika, we're facing like a runoff election in the Public Service Commission.
Right.
And what does that really mean for all of us? A lot of people don't know what the Public Service Commission is or does. When you go in the booth, it says PSC, it doesn't say Public Service Commission. Why is that race both important to everybody on this call, and why is it politically important in the whole scheme of things? And tell us when the runoff election is.
So the runoff election is December 10th, and early voting will start. I've got to double check the schedule, but I believe it will start the weekend before on December, not on the 3rd. It should start, November
26th.
I'm double checking. November early voting should be November 26th. Oh, sorry, November 26th to the 3rd. And then the election itself will be on December 10th. So it's a really quick turnaround time. And it's an incredibly important race because the Public Service Commission is one of those bodies that not a lot of people know about. And what we have been working with at the statewide level with our partners at Housing Louisiana and with other partners is to try to educate people on how important it is to make sure that the Public Service Commission is monitored and watched, and not just has the right person on it, but it also is a part of that engagement strategy, the accountability strategy that Raymond chatted about. The Public Service Commission regulates everything from how all of our utilities at a statewide level. While New Orleans has a different regulatory body for our local utilities, the New Orleans City Council, we are still a part of that larger system. For example, that larger system one of the things that they regulate is the cost to call someone who is incarcerated. The fact that you spend $7 a minute speaking to someone who is incarcerated is not something that the city of New Orleans, the citizens of New Orleans are exempt from. Also, because it regulates everything outside of New Orleans, it also had the responsibility to regulate Entergy Louisiana, as it failed to invest in the transmission lines that fell into the Mississippi River last year as a result of Hurricane Ida, plunging the city of New Orleans into darkness for much of it for 3 weeks. And so these are systems that definitely interrelate with our local regulatory body. They also regulate everything from truck rentals and a number of very weird things that are out there, you know, in cable, utilities, and things like that. And we saw this disparate system. If you have any family or friends who live outside of New Orleans and they were struggling with their utility bills during this record summer, it was the Louisiana Public Service Commission who even failed to consider a shutoff moratorium like the New Orleans City Council enacted for the people of New Orleans. Now, that has also backfired on some people, unfortunately, because those bills came due November 1st, and the New Orleans City Council still doesn't have a good repayment strategy in place to help those folks who could not pay their bills during the summer, could not catch up in the when we actually had a fall this year. And they may now be sitting in darkness, but people outside of New Orleans didn't even get the chance to do that. They didn't get the chance to get a break. So these are the things that the Public Service Commission does. This race is very important. New Orleans represents about 40% of the district. And so New Orleans definitely can and must make its voice heard about who represents the entire district, which is fairly similar to the congressional district. It goes up the river parishes and into North Baton Rouge. But we also got to remember that when the folks who are representing that district, are they getting treated the way we want to be treated, right? That the fact that the citizens of New Orleans got additional protection that the rest of the people in the district didn't get should make New Orleanians think about who and how we're using our voices, right? We should be standing next to our neighbors in the river parishes and saying that, hey, whoever's elected needs to do right by them, and that we shouldn't just go, this doesn't matter because we have the additional protection of the New Orleans City Council.
And Andronika, I think, you know, one of the things that we have not been able to effectively do over the last 2 or 3 generations compared to how our parents and grandparents did is organize around consumer issues. And, you know, in the 50s and 60s, sometimes those consumer issues were whether you could try on clothes or whether you would be treated fairly and with dignity as a customer. Those consumer issues, you know, for us now are basically our pocketbook issues. And this agency has so much effect on everybody's pocketbook every day. It's worthy of our attention. I know that Terry and Professor Amity may have to leave us a little bit early. So I want to open it up for questions right now. If you all don't have any questions, I certainly do. So I'm not sure, Valerie, if somebody's monitoring the chat window, if anybody's raised their hand.
Yes. Yes, thank everyone for your question. Everybody's question and comments are very important to us. We have the first question by Dr. VP Franklin. Dr. Franklin, would you like to ask your question, or I can read your question and ask it if you want me to?
Question is pretty short. You could go ahead and read it, Valerie. That'll be fine.
Okay. Dr. Franklin question is, whatever happened to the recall campaign against Mayor Cantrell, and was this campaign justified? We will ask the speakers to answer this question. We will ask Mr. Morrell to direct the speaker to answer the questions, please.
Well, I can tell you what I did hear in a news broadcast was that the recall committee would have an update tomorrow. I'm not sure if any of the other panelists have any other information beyond that.
No, I personally don't, but I did hear what you heard, and I'm not gonna judge whether or not the recall is something that should have been done. But you know, I think this mayor has made some missteps sometimes that it's easy to distract from other stuff that's going on. But I don't think there's any updates to the recall until tomorrow, and it may even be the next day.
Dr. Hamilton,
Okay.
Ms.
Okay.
Morris?
Well, you know, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. You know, clearly, I'm just a little concerned that they have not given us an update much earlier, which kind of suggests to me maybe the petition might not be going as well as expected. And I also believe that the other stuff that's coming in on the media might be a way to get the recall a lot earlier than the date of the recall. So that kind of gives me some suspicion that maybe it's not. But I kind of have mixed feelings from the standpoint of being a political scientist. I do like the features of direct democracy that happens at the state and local level, because it does give the citizens an opportunity to do initiative, petition, recall, and referendum. So I think that's good, and that if they can get the signatures and they can get the election and they can get the mayor recalled, then that's part of the democratic process. On the other hand, as a public administrator, I kind of like the idea of individuals working together to try to get something done. And I also question the political motives behind a lot of the people that are behind the recall. So, you know, I'm not sure if, as with the past amendment, whether in the long run it's going to be in the best interest of the city.
Ms. Morris?
So I would say that from a accountability standpoint, this is the kind of thing that we would like to see more of, not speaking specifically to this recall effort, but more recall efforts in general, especially as we've gotten to the point where, you know, we've got elected officials at the state and local levels who are not being held accountable by the people. They are making decisions on a daily basis that that ignore the basic needs of people. And so there needs to be more accountability. And in fact, our sister organization, the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance, launched a campaign a few years ago with the hopes of getting 80,000 signatures for exactly this reason. The threshold has been lowered, so they're going to lower their number down to 50,000, because it used to take 50,000. It used to take 80,000 people to recall anybody at citywide level. The threshold has been lowered now to 50,000 for a citywide race because of how hard it is. And this is something that has allowed our elected officials, frankly, to kind of act without feeling like there's any real recourse, except for the elections every 4 years or 6 years, depending on things like United States Senator or Public Service Commission. They wait for people to, they want people to have really long memories or to be so tired and dispirited. And it's a form of voter suppression that you kind of find in liberal and progressive communities, where, you know, people are, to your point earlier, Jacques, not being served well by incremental change. And so people get tired and dispirited, and they think, well, at least this person's trying, this person has a D after their name, or they look like me. And that's better than, you know, some QAnon election denier kook. When those folks who are quite dangerous, these folks are also dangerous because the decisions that they're making cost people their lives. So I agree with Dr. Amity that we need more of this, and it needs to be done. The people need to be driving it is the qualifier that what I would put on this is that it needs to be, it does need to be authentic. It does need to be homegrown, and it does need to be more routine. That like, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. And too many of our politicians they don't move like that.
I'm glad you summed it up that way, Andronika. I agree that it's an important accountability measure. And the unfortunate thing in this case, the target of the recall, I think the public wants to send a message to all of their elected officials. They want to send a warning. And the current target was just the lowest hanging fruit, I believe. Ultimately, I agree. It's good for politicians, elected officials, to understand that if they betray the trust of the people who elected them, they could get thrown out. I think it's an important accountability measure, and whether it was justified or not, I think we'll find out if they get the signatures and if the voters decide. I agree with the rest of the panelists. If it's the will of the voters, I support it.
Forgive me,
Okay.
Jack. I need to get off. I have another meeting.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Terry. We really
It's great to
appreciate
see
it.
all of you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
VerityNews.org. The link is in the chat box. So please follow Verity News. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting me.
Next, we have Mr. Sweet. Mr. Sweet had placed a question in the chat, but I see he came on. Hi, Mr. Raymond Sweet. Good seeing you.
How you doing, Ms. Jefferson? Good seeing
All
you.
right. Good. So you would like to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretend like that whole recall question wasn't asked, and I'm going to focus on my question, and because I'm not a panelist, but I got a lot to say about that. But I'll focus on the thing that I want to ask about.
Okay.
The state of Louisiana, as well as Florida and some other places, lost in court. They lost their redistricting privileges, as it were, or the maps that they submitted were considered unconstitutional. When are the new maps, since it was too close to the election to be redrawn according to these races, when will the new maps be required to be redrawn? Does anyone know the answer to that question? And between Billy and Andy, is his name, whatever his Landry's name is, if a coin could win the toss between those two, who do y'all think is? I know the Republican Party has already supported Landry, but do you think Billy Nungesser is going to go away?
Who wants to take a first stab at that? Let me, point of information. It's my understanding, correct me, Professor Amity and Andronika if I'm wrong, that the redistricting plan is currently under appeal. It's in the federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal.
Right. So it hasn't ended. So yeah, absolutely.
So, and that case is likely to reach the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Alabama case, which they had oral argument last month in the Supreme Court on, is likely to suggest how the Louisiana case turns out.
Correct.
My point is, Brother Sweet, is that there's a lot to play out in that. And I think that the results of this last election, if it has any effect on the outcome in court, it's going to support it, the new maps that would give Louisiana 2 Black congressional seats. Professor Amity, did you have anything to add?
Well, I don't trust the U.S. Supreme Court, so I guess I'm just, I'm not sure that's the direction they're going to go.
Right.
I mean, you're hearing all kind of argument about stuff coming up about what does it mean to be Black? Are we mixed? Are we people who are saying that, putting that there more than one race? So there's all kind of craziness about it. And in that sense, I think it makes more sense to argue it from the standpoint of majority minority district. So rather than just black. So you never know what's going to happen with that. But I think that I'm not as optimistic about this US Supreme Court. And I forgot the other part of the question.
We're gonna get back to the Billy Nunn guest of Landry in a minute. Andronika.
So no comment on that part, but I will say this. I do think it is important that our state government be reflective of who we are, and that this is a state that is majority Democrat, and it is significantly African American. This state has the second highest concentration of African Americans in the country. So we have the second highest percentage of African Americans as our population in the country. And so forget about the partisanship. It needs to be reflective of the people of Louisiana, and the majority of people who live in Louisiana are Democrats. So the fact that we can't seem to get statewide the Democratic representation is a challenge and is a problem. And it's something that we need to grapple with. It truly does need to be representative. I would argue, again, staying away from the idea of partisanship, is that frankly, the tone and tenor of the state party is the problem. And the folks who are emerging are not, who they themselves don't reflect what the people of Louisiana need. And so that's why they're having such a tough time. If all we can do is get someone who is not again, QAnon crazy, and those are the choices, we got to do better than that. And I'm not someone who often argues that elected officials need to be setting the world on fire and all that, and with soaring rhetoric, but they do need to be about something. They need to be able to do something. And if it's not, because talk is cheap, but if you can manage to navigate these political waters, the systemic inequities, and deliver to the people of Louisiana and the people of New Orleans change that actually makes their lives better, then that's something to get behind. And we're just not seeing that. And so there's a number of statewide races next year that we should be looking at, and we should be concerning ourselves with, not just governor, the attorney general has indicated, he's term limited and he's not running, the treasurer, the insurance commissioner,
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State. I mean, the changes that we saw in this election, while we're watching, Louisiana is a bellwether in a way that other people, like, we talk about California, we are the bellwether of bad stuff, right? Like they practice the bad stuff here, and then they go and brand it and export it in other places. I mean, we didn't even notice that while we were watching what was happening in Texas and Georgia. I certainly thought our excellent election laws and our excellent election schedule was not going to be something that people mess with, right? And they did. Like the first time Dr. Amity, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I do not remember ever having a congressional race on a Tuesday before this. And I certainly don't remember early voting going Tuesday to Tuesday, even when we did have a Tuesday election. So these are changes that the Secretary of State has made very quietly. And, Power Coalition and a couple of others have been bird dogging these issues, but we got to stand up and say, no. One of the few things that we did correctly was our elections. All of our elections, except the presidential, were on Saturdays, with 2 Saturdays for early voting. Now we're adding. It was a surprise to me when our boards agreed to give our staff off on election day. I thought, okay, well, once every 4 years. That was a nasty surprise this year when we had to let people off this year. We're like, wait a minute, the off-year congressional race is supposed to be on a Saturday, because that's what we do. And then adding to it a Tuesday to I mean, we didn't do that in 2020. We went Saturday to Saturday in 2020. for this, so this year, for the Secretary of State to be making these changes, you know, following the national pattern of voter suppression is, and Jacques, you said earlier, it worked. We had some of the lowest turnouts in the South.
And we had, historically, we had the lowest midterm turnout in a local election, a Louisiana election, in at least 4 cycles. So that would be back 16 years. You know, the question that you asked about Jeff Landry and Billy Nungesser, it really brings to mind my frustration with the Louisiana Democratic Party, which has failed to run candidates for the statewide constitutional offices. And when candidates did run on their own, failed to support them. And it's one reason why John Bel Edwards is the only statewide elected Democrat, and why we really don't have a bench of up and coming candidates who can compete for statewide office with a D behind their name, even if they are a center right or quote unquote conservative Democrat. I hope that we have a better, more of a choice in the primary than between, you know, a MAGA Republican and a, you know, a relatively moderate Republican, but a Republican pro-corporate candidate nevertheless.
He was a COVID denier too.
Is that, which one? Both of them?
Both were COVID deniers.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about the COVID deniers is, you know, a lot of those COVID deniers were first in line to get their own
Right.
booster shot.
Right.
They were COVID deniers to solicit the support of the MAGA nation, not because they believed in false science, most of them.
Jacques, I'm gonna have to leave too. I'm sorry, but.
No, I appreciate you joining us, and you did tell me that you had to leave, and we appreciate the time you've spent with us, Dr. Amity. I don't want to keep you from your students and your fellow scholars, but I always appreciate the wisdom that you share with me personally, and I'm glad that you've been able to share it with this great group of
Thank
folks
you.
tonight.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the
Thank you for
opportunity.
joining us. We really appreciate you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Okay, John, we have a question from Miss Beth Butler. Miss Beth Butler, would you like to ask your question or you want me to read? Miss Butler question is, isn't there a okay, what Miss Butler?
Please read it for me, Valerie.
Okay. Her question is, isn't there a big strategy notice coming out about the recall, and it's going to be a epic? Will engage each registered voter and it's on. So that's like a question and a statement.
I guess we'll find out when the recall committee makes their announcement tomorrow. I'm curious to know. I think that this recall effort is probably going to continue to get attention. I know that the recall committee has been saying for more than a week that after the primary election, which was a week ago tomorrow, that they're going to have a lot more to say. I don't know if Andronika or anybody else has heard anything more and might be able to respond to that.
Nope.
Bethany, have you heard more? I mean, Beth, have you heard more?
Well, hell yeah. Okay. Yes, it's out there. It's on the wire, babe. And look at all that money they got. Unlike the heroic effort by Hardin to, you know, change the city council composition and had to do it all voluntarily out there on the. This one's going to go pro.
Okay. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Next question, we have a question by Ms. Lane. Ms. Lane.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I guess I'm asking this probably to Andronika. I am still trying to figure out just what the PSC, how it affects us and us, how we are affected by the things that, as you mentioned, that they're either not doing and could do or are doing in the state. And something I really don't know, and I'm not quite sure, maybe I could research it, but anyway, is is, do they have any control or can they regulate anything about the LNG terminals on our coast?
Yes, that is who does that.
Oh, okay. That sends me in the direction. And what about the amount of tax that's being paid, which as I understand it is the lowest, what's paid to Louisiana, which is on the fossil fuels that are extracted?
No, that's federal. That's federal.
So
Yeah.
did our senators and our representatives in the past fall down on that and give something away that they maybe shouldn't have?
Well, I mean, the issues with the oil and gas reserves in the Gulf and the Gulf drilling go back to Louisiana's failure to negotiate with the federal government.
Okay.
And put together a bad deal where they wanted too much and they said, well, it's all or nothing. And the Fed said, well, we'll give you nothing. And and it was something, I mean, it's something that beggared Louisiana for a generation. And it's something that we only just in the last, I mean, as those resources started to tap out, that we started to get our fair share of those resources. So it was the federal government and the state.
Okay.
The failure for them to work together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. The next question we have is from Miss Betty.
Hey guys, I've got a question about the way we handle primaries. Are we going to ever get away from the jungle primary that we are doing now, where everyone runs against everyone? I know it happened during the Edwards administration, not John Bell, but Edwin Edwards. And if that's not, I know it's constitutional, but if that's not possible, could we ever do ranked voting? And would that help the Democrats any?
Well, I don't know that we'll ever get away in our lifetime from an open primary or jungle primary in Louisiana. And a lot of states are suggesting that an open primary is a way to smooth the edges of extreme candidacies.
Right.
I don't know if that is the case here in Louisiana, but I don't think that a change in that, or even some of the more creative and fair systems like ranked choice voting, are going to make any sort of progress here in Louisiana. Andronika, what do you think?
You know, as I like the open primary, and it gives folks a chance to kind of clearly lay some things out, particularly in communities where like the Blue Islands and things like that, and in the Red Islands, people can say like, this is definitely what we believe. I think Jacques has the right of it though. The problem for me is more along the failure of both parties to be representative and be accountable to the voters, to let the extremisms of the QAnon crazies and on the left, the extremisms of apathy, and that is currently, and I know apathy should not be considered extreme, but it's just some extreme apathy that we just see in the Democratic Party. I mean, when you think about the fact that the Democratic Party yielded the majority 6 years ago, I think it was. 6 years ago, they yielded the majority in the state legislature with because of 8 races that were held by Democrats, where those Democrats were term limited, and the state party didn't put up a single Democratic challenger. That's how we lost the House. Before an election, before anybody went to vote, we yielded the majority, even though the population is the majority Democrat. This wasn't gerrymandering, this wasn't strategy, this was a failure of leadership by the Democratic Party to find 8 people to run. And so it's, like, so if you didn't have an open primary, that wouldn't have, if you had parties to close primaries, that wouldn't have helped anything. If the party was not, if both parties were stuck, and on the Republican side, stuck in this extremism of election denial, and voter suppression, and just practicing, hate for sport. yeah, I think both parties have got to be more accountable to their constituents. And that's what we've got to fix. I don't think that there's any election type that can solve for this other than, voting these people out.
Okay. Okay, this was the last question. We're going to ask that Mr. Jacques Morel and our guest speaker we have time for you all to have y'all last statement or y'all last remark. And we really thank you all for coming and join us on Just Beyond. And Mr. Morel, this is my first time partnering with you, and I'm praying that you come back. I will partner with you anytime, Mr. Morel. You are awesome. Thank you so much.
I've had a great time. I'm gonna let Andronika close. And
Okay.
Remind us what's coming up. This election is not over in Louisiana.
That's right. There's a lot of things on the ballot. There's also 3 constitutional amendments up on the ballot, including one of these, what's the word I'm looking for here? These culture war issues where on the ballot, we're going to get to vote whether or not someone who is not a citizen can register to vote. So, and again, it's the kind of thing where everybody would go, well, of course I'm going to vote in favor of that. It's not really a problem. But we also have to be careful as we send messages to undocumented workers, as we send messages to immigrants, asylum seekers, and things like that. We also have to start sending messages that repudiate these as not problems, right? And so if I had my druthers, I tell everybody to skip that question and nobody vote for it at all, and send a message to the legislature that we will not allow them to waste our time with things that aren't a problem. And on top of those issues here in New Orleans, so those 3 items will be on the ballot, as well as the Public Service Commission, the runoff for Public Service Commission. These things do affect us. We do need to think about how the PSC affects us and our neighbors, and vote accordingly. And who, no matter who wins, we all have to join in and hold those elected officials accountable. The Alliance for Affordable Energy, our partner, does a fantastic job of bird dogging and watchdogging. The Public Service Commission for far too long they've been there by themselves. And Housing NOLA and the partners across the state, other housing agencies across the state have been joining them, and we need more people. We need more groups like Justice and Beyond there as well.
Thank you, Andronika. I want to thank you specifically, Andronika, for joining us tonight, but I want to personally thank you for the opportunity to work with you and work in support of people we care about. I really appreciate your leadership and your energy and your courage. I want to thank Terry Baquet, Verite News. I put the link in the chat. Please follow Verite News. I want to thank Professor George Amity from SUNO, and I also put the link to his great paper on community policing and social justice. Please check out his paper. And I want to thank Justice and Beyond and all of the people who make Justice and Beyond an important forum and place for people to share information and understanding and to act together in our own best self-interest. Thank you to the pillars, and thank you especially Ms. Jefferson for your leadership.
Thank you so much. Again, we want to thank
you,
Just Beyond. We want to thank everyone. If you have any announcement or you want Just Beyond to spread out and put it on our Facebook page and send it to our network, please put it in the chat. We want to thank you again, Mr. Morel. We want to thank you again, Ms. Morrison. Ms. Morrison, I always enjoy your information. I spread your information to my family, my friends, and my network, especially in housing. You are very good at what you do. We really appreciate you, what you're going through and what you are going through for us. You're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for us. And we thank you for that.
Thank you.
We have an announcement by Miss Betty. You have your hand up.
Let me get my mute off. I'm going to put a link right now in the chat real quickly. I should have done it earlier. I apologize. Ernest Johnson isn't with us tonight, but I'm on the board of Ubuntu Village NOLA, and we are having our gala on Friday evening at 7 at Capulet Bywater, and I will put I'll put a link in it so you can go to the registration. Really appreciate your support if you all can come. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else? We're gonna close out. We're gonna get ready to close out. Brooke, any one of the pillars, while we have time, any one of the pillars would like to make a comment, 2-minute comment or announcement. Then after the pillars speak, we will close out with a prayer, and we thank everyone for coming. And you all have a safe night. No one?
I don't think
So,
so. I just,
okay.
I wanted to say that I did put a notice in the chat to ask if people want to be on the mailing list, and I will gladly add them to that. And with that same thought, I suppose, is coming to one of our pillar meetings. If you are at all interested in becoming a pillar organization with Justice and Beyond. The more the merrier, you know, with a coalition like this, you need all of us behind the same issues and the same backing. We're more powerful. Thank you.
Okay, with that said and done, we're gonna get ready to close out. Do we have, I don't see him. So anyway, we're gonna close out with a prayer. Oh, my gracious Father in heaven, we come to you again with thanksgiving in our heart. This was a very enlightening and important forum that Just Beyond had tonight. We thank you for allowing us to join Just Beyond tonight at this forum, so we can learn from each other, for each other can get this information. We can pass it to our family and our friends and our network, that we can be very boisterous and very strong in our vote, for we know what's going on in our city and our state. Lord God, we thank you for this information. We thank you, Lord God, for your word. We thank you for our health and strength. We pray, Lord God, Jesus, that you continue to protect us from evildoers. Continue to bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that we may be very productive in our city, in our state, that we may continue to support one another. We pray, Lord God, Jesus, that you bless us with more people that will join Just Beyond, not just Beyond, but other advocates, that we can have a better living. We thank you for each speaker. We thank you for our guest moderator. We ask, Lord God, Jesus, be blessed in your name. Amen. Amen. Everybody have a good night.
Good night.
See
Thank
you
y'all
next
again.
Monday.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.